right, well, I'm Reva, and I organize the special events for Quality Sewing, and I'm really excited for you all having this beautiful machine. You purchased your brother Luminaire or your Solaris at Expo, so we're really excited for you, and it's a really fabulous machine. So we're going to start with some kind of general tour, I guess, is what we will do real quick, and then we will get into some other fun things. So I'm going to try to switch my screen here and see if I can do that. Hold on, share screen. Okay, is everyone seeing the machine right here where my hand is? If someone could answer yes or no. Yes, was that a yes?
I can see it.
Oh, good. Yay. Okay, thank you. That is wonderful. Okay, so on the machine, now don't get seasick. I'm going to kind of move this camera a little bit so we can get a better overview of the whole machine. Now, you've probably noticed that your machine has an amazing amount of light. I have the light turned down because you're not going to be able to see some of the features on the machine if I have the light all the way up. It's just too bright for the camera. You do have your buttons here. You have your tie off, your needle down, thread cutter, foot up, down, your speed control, and this is for sewing, not embroidery, your needle threader, your reverse, and your start stop. Of course, you have a foot control that you're welcome to use. I'm a foot control girl. I don't know about you guys, but that is something that makes me happy, is to use a foot control. And then you have your needle plate here. And I'm going to take the foot off. At the back of your foot or your ankle, you have a little button you can push, and that will drop the foot off. And I just did that so I have a little bit more clearance here. This is your needle plate and your bobbin area here. But this little guy is really awesome. This is a release for your needle plate. So if you pull that towards you, it releases so you can get in there to clean and to do all sorts of great things, and also to change your needle plate to a straight stitch needle plate should you want to do that. And then I'm just going to snap the foot back on. Okay. It's better for me to put my foot down onto it. There we go. All right. Okay, so but that's what this is for. You don't have to have tools anymore to get in to there, which is really pretty wonderful. On the top of the machine, we're going to wind a bobbin real quick because I wanted to make sure that I showed you something kind of neat on the machine. So when you get your machine, you have a contraption that looks like this, and this is an external thread stand, and it has a nice tall tower, so you are able to use a big cone of thread. So you pull the tower up, and then this flips over, and then you can lift up the spool pins. So you can use small spools or cones, and it just rests right there on the machine in the lid, which is really pretty neat. And you can choose to use that, or you can choose to use your standard spool, which is right here. This one is for winding a bobbin when you already have a thread on the machine. But we're going to use the tower real quick, and I'm going to see if I can reach over the all my equipment here. Now, when you are threading the machine from the tower, there is this little guy right here, and you do want to go under that clip and get into this place first, then go ahead and thread the machine. Not everyone knows that. Okay, so now I'm going to wind a bobbin. So what I'm going to want to do, sorry, didn't mean to bump you there, is go around the pin right here. And then my bobbin, I need to move you a little bit. Bobbin is right over here. And you can, and there's directions right on the face of the machine for you to be able to do this. And then there's a little notch in the base that the bobbin rests on, and there's a thread cutter in there, so you can just pull off the thread and take care of that. But what I wanted to bring your attention to is when you're sitting at your machine later, take a look. There's a little selector here where you can choose to have a low filled bobbin, a slightly filled bobbin, you know, a medium, and a full bobbin. So whichever you choose, you're going to be able to fill the bobbin that amount. And that's really a neat feature. So I'm going to go ahead and click this on here, which is telling the bobbin winder to work. And you'll see right here on my screen, it says, are you ready to start? And there's a speed control here. I like to wind my thread at a medium speed, so that way it doesn't pull the thread too much and make it too tight. And the bobbin is winding away. There's actually a second bobbin winding motor in there. So you're going to be able to wind your bobbin and not tax the machine as you do that. And you can also wind at the same time you're sewing. Now that's in theory because I'm not coordinated enough to do that. So I never try it. Okay, so I just had mine on, fill it a little bit, and then I'll be able to use that thread cutter up there and get that off. Okay, so back we go here, and then we're going to do some fun sewing stuff, but I just wanted to point that out to you because not a lot of people realize that there is the bobbin choices for the different amounts of thread that you want to put on there. So, all right. Now, also remember that on our website, qualitysewing.com, there is a get to know your Luminaire and Solaris machine, which goes over some other basics and some other fun things. All right, so I'm just going to quickly thread the machine just so we are ready to go. And don't you love the thread cutter? I mean, with a touch of a button, yay. I love that. Okay, so I'm going to turn off my screen share now and go back over to our other piece. Okay, so now you should be seeing the image of the screen of the machine. Is that what everyone is seeing? Hopefully, yes.
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 Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, so when you're on the main screen, no matter if you're on a Brother or on a Baby Lock, it's pretty much the same thing, but it may be, you know, obviously the wallpaper is going to look a little bit different. And you're also going to see on a Brother, you're going to see a Disney category. And then on a Brother, IQ Designer is Design Center. But otherwise, they are the same. There's a few different designs that are different between the two models, but other than that, in practicality, they're all the same. Okay, so up at the top, what I want to bring your attention to is the little piece of paper right here. And this little piece of paper is your settings. So this is where you're going to get to make choices about like the volume of the speaker, the lighting, and things like that. So we have our sewing controls, general machine, embroidery specific controls, and your Wi-Fi. Okay, so there are 12 pages currently in the machine, and if you want to make a setting change on the machine, you just scroll through here and you can find it. If you know that it has to do with sewing, you can simply touch the sewing part. If you know it has to do with embroidery, you can go to the embroidery section and then take a look at what is there. And then when you're done, just touch OK. All right. Another really awesome button is what I call the button. It's a little box with a question mark in it. And this is where you're going to find all of your information about the machine. This is where the manual lives. And it is in sections between sewing and embroidery. And then in here are kind of the cliff notes. So if you want to know how to do certain things, that would be in the operation. So under basic operation, maybe you want to know how to thread the machine. And this will give you multiple pages of instructions on how to do that. When you see a button like that that has a movie on it, if you touch that, it's going to play a movie for you showing you how to do everything that the tutorial was telling you to do. So this is a really great feature because there's movies on so many different things in the machine. There is no audio to the videos, so if you're not hearing them, don't think your machine, there's something wrong with it. It just doesn't have, there is no audio to these. So they're universal, no language needed. And so that's a pretty cool thing, because I don't know about you, but there's a lot of times that I find that I go off on vacation or I don't use a certain feature for my machine for a while, and then I don't remember how to do something. So it's right there for us. Okay, let's take a look at some things in sewing. On the machine itself, and for some of you, this may be a little bit of a review if you've had a Brother machine or a Baby Lock machine before, or if this is new, it may. So hopefully it's a reminder for if you haven't, if you've had a Brother or Baby Lock machine, or it's new information. So hopefully that all works for you. The screen here is a 10.1-inch touch screen that works a lot like an iPad or a smartphone, in that you can scroll up and scroll down, excuse me, and you can simply touch to choose your stitch. And then the stitch here is displayed in true size, and it shows you the foot that you should have on for that specific stitch, because different feet have different bottom sides that help feed that specific style of stitch. So, excuse me. So you're able to know which foot is the right one to use. All right. So the next thing that I want to point out is that there are different styles of stitches. When you first get your machine, you're probably going to default on 0-1 or 0-2, depends on the machine, but you'll notice that that is a left side straight stitch. So it's going to be stitching along the left side of the foot. And the reason for this is that is the most stable spot on the machine for a straight stitch to be formed, because it's right near the edge of the foot for support. And it also is near the side of the opening in the needle plate of the machine. So it just is a really, really secure spot for a straight stitch to be stitched. Now, if you've been sewing for a while and that drives you crazy, it's okay, because 103 and 104 are center style stitches. So that's how I prefer to stitch, is using my center needle position. Also, if you use a straight stitch needle plate or a quilting foot that only has one hole, you definitely want to make sure that you're using a centered stitch. If you do a lot of quilting, you'll notice there's actually a Q on your menu here. So we have different menus, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Q. If you go to Q, the ones with P are piecing stitches. So they are designed for a shorter stitch length for piecing, and it also will be positioned so it's a 1/4 inch from the right side of the foot. So if you're using a like if I choose this, you notice it still says J foot. So if you're using a 1/4 inch foot, just verify that it is a 1/4 inch and not narrower, because you would be unhappy if it was smaller than a 1/4 inch. Okay, so you have your utility stitches, and then we have some decorative stitches here with overcasting, and there's some scallops. You have some more overcasting and stretch stitches, and then also some entre-deux stitches. You've got beautiful buttonholes and basting in here, or I'm sorry, darning in here. And then 5 is a multi-directional stitch. So the feed dogs on this machine are designed to go more than just forward and back. They go diagonal and sideways as well. So you can sew something in a square. You can have it go right, then down, and then left, and then up. And it's really handy if you've ever had to sew on a little patch on a uniform arm for the soccer team or whatnot. This is amazing, because then you're not having to turn the project around, because you can't do that when you have a little tiny sleeve, right? And so that's really useful. It's also great to use to sew on tote bag handles when you want to do like Crisp X reinforcement on the handle. You can use these tools right here. And then under S, you're going to find basting stitches and sashiko looking stitches. So those are the general stitches, but in decorative character stitch, this is where you're going to find all the pretty fun things. So if we scroll through this menu, you can see some beautiful decorative stitches in here. And down on the bottom, let me choose one. You'll notice that this is where you can change the width of the stitch, the length of the stitch. So if I want to make this narrower and I want to make it longer, you can do that. And notice how this changed to be not highlighted with a black box. That means it's been changed. If it has the black box, that means it is the default setting. So when you come back through here, you can find what the default is just by looking at the color. A left-right shift is where it takes the stitch in the opening of the foot and can move the whole stitch left or right. And this can be really handy if you're trying to line something up with a spot on your foot, and then you're able to use the foot as a reference point. So did you see how it has moved over? You probably saw the image here on the screen as it's moving. So that can be really handy too. But you have several different menus of different stitches. And of course, it all is just like an iPad. You can use the scroll bar here on the side to move them. But it's also just very easy just to swipe up and choose your stitch. Okay, so let's go back. And if there's any questions, feel free to jump in. I'm going to go back to my straight stitch. And is there anyone who does have a question at this moment in time? All right.
Sorry,
okay.
Reva?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, it's Francesca. Could you show how you found those piecing stitches?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So when you open up the machine and you're on, are you guys getting any feedback, or is the volume okay for you?
It's fine for me.
Thank you. Okay, so when it first opens into sewing, so if I go back, let's go back to home. When you have this screen and you touch sewing and you want to use a piecing stitch, it's one of the menus here at the top. So if you scroll across the top, you'll see a Q for quilting. And then there's PPP, those are piecing stitches. Okay. So if I were to choose one of them there, my stitch length went from 2.5 down to 2. And it also shifted the stitch over, so it's closer to the right-hand side.
Got it. Now I see it. Thank you.
Well, you are welcome. Okay, so we'll go back to a regular straight stitch. Like I said, I'm a center needle position girl, so that makes me much more happy. Okay, so let's take a look at the machine and how it's going to show, it's going to help us with this really neat feature. This is our projected guideline, and I'm going to turn it on and I'm going to switch screens here. Okay, so you should be able to see the lines on the fabric. Okay, so the projected guidelines are adjustable, and they're going to allow you to choose the position that you want to have them at. So it can line up with either like center needle position, which the red one is doing right now, and the green one, I believe, is at 1/4 inch. So let's take a look at that. Over here, this is my main line. So that is, oh, you can't see that. I have to turn it off. Okay, so remember what you're seeing on that screen, and then I'm going to go back and show you with the camera on the machine. Okay, so the main line was that red one, which was that center needle position. And then you can choose the color. And right now, the red one is selected, which is great. If you want to move that needle, the line left or right of center needle position, you can do that. And that's just very similar to moving your needle left and right. But of course, this doesn't change your needle position. It just changes the line. Okay. Now the sub line is the secondary line, and that was our green line. Right. So here you can choose how far away from center you want that line to be. And in our case, it was 1/4 inch away. Okay, so that way you can put the raw edge of your fabric up against the green line and know that you're 1/4 inch away. And I'm going to shift back to the machine screen. All right. Okay, so here you can see that I have the 2 lines. So can you see, or does that make sense, how if you were to take your other piece of fabric, how you could get that lined up right there? I think I have a little piece right here. So if I was stitching this at 1/4 inch, I could line up the raw edge with the green and have the red to know where my stitch is going to go. Okay. This is really handy because now you're able to look all the way out here to where your stitch, where you're aiming, right? So like when you drive your car, you look ahead of where you're driving. And that is good advice to do when you're sewing as well. So you're looking ahead of where you are, because if you're trying to correct by the time you get back to the needle, it's really too late to true up your stitches and your timing. Okay. All right. So let's look at some other things. I'm going to turn off this screen share here, and we're going to go back to our little guy here. So on here, you're going to see other characteristics. So I'm going to show you the differences here on the screen, and then we're going to go over to the machine and take a look at what they look like. The first one is a grid line. And anytime on your machine a button is highlighted blue, that means that is selected. So you have a grid line, and we're going to talk about that. Then there's also an angle. And the angle, there are various degrees of angle. There's a 90 degree, a 60 degree, and a 45 degree. So now let's take, I'm going to go back to our straight line, and we're going to go back to sharing. I'm going to show you the other camera. All right. So on here, you can see we have the straight line. If I choose grid, it projects a grid on the surface, and you can change the size of the grid. You can make it less than 1/4 inch, and you can make the grid more than 1 inch apart. And what this is really great for is doing parallel rows of stitches or quilting and doing channel stitching. Instead of marking your whole piece of fabric with a grid or the lines that you want to quilt on, you can just have them projected and just line up one of the lines out here with the line that you've already stitched, and then you know that it's going to be perfectly parallel. And it's also great for decorative stitches. On the angles, we have various degrees of angles. This is a 45 degree angle. And I'm going to take the foot off again because I want you to see how cool that is. Can you see how the red comes up and it makes a point, but the green doesn't? That's because the red is actually the shape of the stitching line, and the green is the seam allowance. So if you were doing something like sewing bias binding together, like I've got some bias right here. Let me shift this out of the way. Okay, so if I was stitching bias together, you know how you want to stitch it and you want to take it and then flip so you have your strips together. You can align can you see the edge of the fabric here? I align that with that green line back there, and then I can see that I'm actually stitching straight right here. So you don't have to question whether you have it in at the right angle or not, which is really, really pretty cool. It's also great for doing triangles. So if you're stitching, let me see if I have just a plain old triangle. Of course not. Okay, so if you were sewing triangles together, we'll pretend that I'm going to do a triangle here. if you want to stitch down and make 2 half square triangles, if you align your edge of your fabric with your 45-degree line there, and then just watch this line as your stitching line, then you're going to have it stitched right exactly where you want it to go. So that's a big time saver because you're not having to mark your fabric. Okay, and then at any time, if you have a question, just let me know. Then the next degree that we have is 60 degrees. And this is the degree that you're going to find when you're doing something like a Lemoyne star. Because when you stitch these, you need to not stitch all the way to the edge. You stop a 1/4 inch in, and you'll notice that when you put a star point in here, your stitching will come to the point, but you're not at the very point of the fabric. So you're starting in, which is really a time saver when you're putting those together. Then the next degree that we, yes, ma'am? Oh, I thought I heard someone. Okay. The next angle that we have is a 90 degree, and it comes straight out to the side. And this is really great if you're doing any type of design or stitch where you want to turn a corner. So you get to the end and you have your needle down. When you rotate, you can see if you're lined up with the previous row of stitches to make sure that you had turned that perfect corner. So that's a real handy one to have as well. So the projected guidelines are very, very useful, and I hope you try using those because I think you will like them. All right, let's go back to our regular screen. I had this all set up so that way you could see both screens at the same time, and then my computer stopped cooperating with me, which I thought was really thoughtful of it. So we're doing this one at a time. Okay, so that's how that feature works with the projected guidelines. Another item in the sewing side that is really amazing is the projector. Now, I say it looks like a party hat, which I think is pretty cool. So we're going to have a party with that. And what this will do is it will project onto the fabric the stitches that you're going to, that you may want to use. So let me get another piece of fabric down, and I'm going to slip that underneath the machine, and I'm going to switch over views. All right, and I'm going to tip you down a bit so don't get seasick on me, I hope. So it would make me sad. Okay. All right, so you have some icons right here on the machine. And I know you can't really see what they look like, but so I'll try to describe them to you. This is an X, so you can close. This is a dark, medium, and light. So when you're looking at your fabric, if you're using a dark or a medium or light fabric, you may need to have this viewed in a different way because you can't see your stitch very well, so you can change how it's projecting it. This is the main menu for your stitches. Then we have a width adjustment of negative and plus, a length adjustment of negative and plus, and then a shift, moving the stitch left and right. Now, on the machine, I'm going to go into the decorative stitches, and I'm going to bring up something kind of fun. So this is a cute stitch here. And the neat thing about this feature is that you're able to see a real view of the exact size that that stitch is going to stitch out on your project, so you don't have to guess. And if you want to say, I don't know, should it be smaller or should it be bigger? You can use your pen that you get with the machine. And I got to ask, so someone get ready to turn your microphone on. I'm seeing a long delay on the video from what I'm showing you, what I'm saying. Is that the case on your guys' end?
Not obvious.
Not on yours?
No.
Okay, good. Okay. All right. So on the stitch here, if I want to make it narrower, you have this little pen that came with your machine, and this side is a stylus that you can use on the screen, and this side, when you push the button, it lights up, and that's communicating to the machine. So on the stitch, if I want to make it narrower, all you have to do is put the pointer down on the width minus button and then click, and then watch the stitch on this displayed right here is getting narrower. If you want to make it closer together, you can shorten it up. And so you can actually edit and change the stitch to how you want it to appear on your fabric. And then when you're happy with that, you can close it out. Well, if you're working with it and you're thinking, I don't know if that's even the stitch I want, that's where the full menu comes in. Put your pointer right there, click the button, and it goes to the full menu. And then you're able to see the stitch that is left or right of it. And it will cycle through the stitches so you can addition different ones. And if that's the one you want, click set, and that becomes the stitch that we're going to work with. If it will listen to me. There we go. All right. So now back over here, now that we have a stitch up, I want to show you how the dark, light, and medium backgrounds look. So right now it's on the dark background. So you see there's no light around here. If I go to medium, it has a little bit of light, and then if you go to the light, it goes very, very bright. And so for our case, having it on dark is the best one. But depending on your color of fabric, you're going to find that to be a different need depending on the color of your fabric. Okay. All right. So are there any questions on using the pen? All right, you guys are a quick group, I guess. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and X that out. I had showed you where the X was, so I'm going to close that out so it's no longer on here. But you notice that the stitch that we had chosen there is on display now, and that is really, really a fun option to be able to get to. All right, any questions in sewing? Are you guys ready to go to embroidery? All right, I take that as a yes. Oh, there is something I want to show you in sewing. Okay, Christine, did you have a question?
No, I'm fine. Thanks, Reva.
Okay. All right. So in the utility stitching, one thing that I like to do when I am sewing is I like the foot to raise when I stop sewing. So I'm going to pop my foot back on here, and I will not struggle with it as much because I use two hands. But you have some options down here at the bottom. If you want to cut the thread when you're done sewing, you can ask it to. I like to have the needle stop in the down position when I'm sewing, so I've asked it to always do that. And then this one right here is our pivot position. And so let's take a look at that real quick. It is a pretty neat tool to use. So if we're sewing, let me put my foot down, and I'm sewing in slow because I'm not good at the go button. But when you're done and you want to, or you need to stop, when you stop, the foot raises up so you can pivot or realign or do whatever it is that you need to do, which is really pretty handy. So that feature is, oh, did I not even push share so you didn't see it, did you? You guys are so good. Okay, so here it is again. I'm going to raise up the camera a little bit just so you can see the buttons. Okay, so when we're sewing and then we stop, the foot will raise up if that icon on the screen is selected. So that way you're able to pivot or readjust. So that's a very good one to use. So I highly recommend that. And that's a newer feature on the machine. So we were all pretty excited when we're able to do that. All right. Any Sewing questions, or are you guys ready to move over to embroidery? All right. Okay, embroidery, there is tons of fun to be had over on the embroidery side. One of the things that the machines have been known for a long time is the fact that they have a snowman sticker. Now, the snowman sticker is something that a lot of people don't realize that they have. So I want to just show you that real quick. I know it's probably a review for some of you, but maybe not for everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my main menu and go to embroidery, switch over, and then let me show you what we've got going on here. All right. So when you're doing embroidery, placement can be the tricky thing. And so a lot of times what we do is we know where we want the design to go, and then we try to hoop it straight, because on your hoops, if you've ever noticed on your hoops, there are little nubbins that show you the horizontal and the vertical centers of your hoop. Now your hoop, this happens to be a 5x7 hoop, but the hole is actually larger than 5x7. The 5x7 is your sewing area. It has to have a little bit of a margin for the foot and the movement of the machine. So don't be confused that if your machine doesn't sew all the way to the plastic edge here, that it's not giving you the full size. It is. The hole is bigger than what it says the hoop is. Okay. So when we're hooping, a lot of times we want to make sure that we get this straight in there, and that can be a very difficult thing to get your fabric in straight, especially if you're working with a button placket or something like that. And just frankly, everything slips and slides around when you're trying to work with it. So that's where our snowman comes in. Now the snowman sticker is just what he sounds like. He's a little sticker that looks like a snowman. And just like a snowman, the little part is his head. That means up. Okay. And his belly is the bottom of him. So the machine recognizes this and can tell which way the design should be facing based on where the head is. So if the head is leaning this way, then up needs to go that way. If the head's leaning this way, the up needs to go that way. Okay. But the really awesome part is that it also has horizontal and vertical alignments. So you can take your project before you've stitched it out or even tried to hoop it, and you can put the sticker on and match it up with your vertical and horizontal lines and then hoop it. And when you do that, it won't even matter how you've put it in the hoop, because the machine's going to fix it for us. You can see I don't have that in there very straight. And in fact, it's upside down. So I'm going to put this on the machine real quick. Just slide him on. And then I want to show you, as I'm doing this, I want to show you something about when you put your hoop on your machine. So I'm going to back you up a little bit. Okay, so this is the path that our hoop goes in. And not as important for the little 4x4 hoop, but when you're using one of the big hoops, try to slide it in and out using the bottom left-hand corner. Okay, so I'm going to slip this in here, and then new hoops on a new machine, a lot of times this can be very, very stiff and tough to get in. So if you place your finger back here and then slide it in, what you're doing is you can hold this in position, because this whole arm can move back and forth, and that if we push it in and we shift this, then the whole design or the hoop can be out of registration, and then you're not going to get the design placed where you want it to go. So make sure that you are careful not to move this or the arm left or right or this back and forth. If it does move, or it bumps into a wall, or you're walking by and you bump the hoop while it's stitching, turn off the machine and turn it back on. And then the machine will remember where you were stitching, and it will have the hoop back in the proper spot. Okay. All right, so now over on the machine here, I'm going to come in and I'm going to get a smallish design. I think there's something cute. Oh, that was cute. Did you see that? There's so many pretty designs in here. I like this little bee. He's really cute. Or maybe the butterfly. I like the butterfly. Okay, so when we choose that and we set it, you're going to see that there's a definite up to the butterfly. And our stickers on our fabric here, but remember we have it upside down and crooked. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to embroidery. We're ready to sew, and under layout, look at that. There's a little image of the snowman. And so when you touch that, it's going to go ahead and use the built-in camera on the machine to find the snowman sticker we had on the fabric, and it's already found it. And it's going to move and rotate the butterfly. So the center of the design is right in the belly button of the snowman. Isn't that cool? And this is the best reminder of all. Take that sticker off. But that is a really, really neat way for you to quickly get your embroidery right where you want it to be. You also have a little button up at the top that is a camera with a little piece of fabric behind it. And if you touch that and you ask it to scan, what it's going to do is take a picture of what's in the hoop and display it right on the screen. So let me see if I can zoom in here. I don't seem to have a zoom. Well, bummer. Can you see it? Can you see the lines of the fabric there? I hope you can. If not, we'll do this. I'll put a piece of fabric on the hoop so that way there's some contrast and you can see that, and we'll just scan it again. Okay, so then you can see where the detail is of whatever fabric you're working with. So that's a pretty neat feature as well.
Reba,
Okay.
I've got a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so with this feature, when I am using the text to make quilt labels, can I use the snowman, do the cross hatch on the center of my fabric that's hooped, and then put the snowman on to make sure that then my text is going to be exactly in the center of the fabric?
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And then you can also be confident that it's going to be straight.
Right, exactly.
On that piece of fabric.
Yeah.
And lettering, that's a tough one. And it can be a challenge to work with lettering because if it's not straight, everybody and their brother knows it. So,
right. So then I've just been making adjustments when I, trimmed it. But now I won't have to make that adjustment, it looks like. So that's awesome.
Right. It should save you some time. And then Christine, too, on those quilt labels, think about using the lightweight thread. It's embellished the perfection thread, I think is what it's called, but it's a 60 weight, and then Quilter Select has an 80 weight. So if you're doing small letters and you want them to look crisp and clear to see, use a finer weight thread.
Okay, great. Thanks for the tip.
You are welcome. Okay. There it is. Okay, so the next thing that I want to share with you is really pretty exciting. And this is on the embroidery side. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clear my, whoops, I don't want a memory. I'm going to return and I'm going to go up to my settings. You remember how I showed you at the beginning there was settings? I'm in embroidery and I want to go to the last, one of the last pages here, and I want to delete my background image because I'm not using that anymore. And so then it should go away for us. So that can be a good tool. If you are embroidering and you finish the embroidery, usually the image will go away. But if you were going back and forth, that can be frustrating to have that image displayed there. Okay, so now I have this item hooped And it's an embroidery that I've already done. And we can take that butterfly and put him right where we want him to go. So there's a couple of different ways that we can do that. So if I know exactly where the center of that is, and I can measure it from the leaf, you can use the snowman, but that's a lot more thinking than what I want to do. So we can scan the background, remember, and it can display our pumpkin right here. So that way you can visually place it, but there's an even better way. And that is with the little party hat, and that turns on the projector. So I'm going to switch screens so you can see what I'm seeing over here. All right. Can you see my little butterfly right there? Let me see if I can get in a little bit closer and get a different angle, a little bit different angle, and maybe you can see him a little bit better. So there's my butterfly. So on the screen in the machine, I'm going to rotate it and get it how I want him to be. And see, maybe I want him to be angled kind of like that. And then I want to move him over here. And I'm going to show you what I'm doing on the screen here in a minute. But then you can just move him and get him exactly how you want him to be. And then you know how it's going to sew out because you can see it right there. And that is absolutely amazing. So now let's take a quick look at what that looks like on the machine itself. So I'm going to cancel this out and I'm going to turn that back on. So I'm going to turn the party hat on, and then you wait just a little bit, and then you'll get the projection on your fabric. Now, what you're seeing here, the red area is the section that the projector is showing up on the fabric. Okay, it can't, the camera is, and the projector is mounted just inside the housing above the needle threader there. So there's no way to get it to broadcast over the whole hoop because it's too close. So it can only do a little area at a time, but that's okay. You just need to line up certain points, so that's fine. So if you need to look down here, you can simply touch and drag, and that will change where the camera's view is. Okay, and then if you want to see up here, you just touch and drag to move the camera's view up there. You have the same dark, medium, and light backgrounds, which we had on the stitches. Remember when I touched this one, you couldn't really see it because it was too bright for the camera. So you do have those settings here. And if you need to move the design, you use the arrows here. Whereas when you're not in this function, then you would touch and drag. But in here, the touching and dragging is for where the camera is showing you, and the arrows are for the movement of the design. So let's take a look at that again. All right, so I brightened up the square so you can see that's that red boundary here. And if I want to move where it's looking on the screen, I simply touch and drag, and then the hoop will move so it's underneath the camera. And then if you want to move it to a new spot, you can do that. But if you want to move the design, you need to use the button on the front of the machine. Okay, any questions there? There's so much in this machine, so don't be nervous if it's stuff that you haven't used yet. The machine has so much to share, and a lot of the features you will use every single day, and then the more advanced features will be there when you want them and you're ready for them. So because it can be a little a new machine can make you nervous to begin with, and then with all features like these, it's easy to be overwhelmed. Now, in just general, on the embroidery screen, you're going to notice on the machine, I'm going to go out all the way so I can show you this from scratch. In embroidery, you can use some of the designs that are built in, but under the pocket, you'll find different things. You'll find things that you have saved that you had worked on, or you can access a USB stick or Wi-Fi. So if you have a USB stick with embroidery designs that you've purchased, you pop that in the side of the machine here, and then you'll be able to bring them up here. If you have the PE Design or the palette software, you can have it send designs from the software and you would retrieve them here. So there's different ways to get designs. So we're going to go back and just grab a design. I like the lemons. They're so pretty. So we'll set that up. When you first choose your design, and we're in the kind of the editing screen, you're going to see some things. There's the size. And if yours is displaying in metric and you want it to be in inches, you'll find that in your settings page. And we might need to, there it is. It's on the second page in embroidery. It's right here, and you can choose inches or metric, whichever you prefer. Then you have underneath it, you have a list of the different colors that come in, that are in the design. And if you want to change them, you can do that. So I touched a color, here it is here, and I could go through and say, I want that to be blue. Oh, isn't that fantastic? Not really. But you can choose that. You can choose the brand of thread that you want to work with. So if you want to use Floriani, you can choose Floriani. And then you can match your colors exactly to the thread that you have. Another one that's really cool is the color visualizer. And in here, it will take your design and it can do a couple of different things. Well, it will do one thing. It's going to give you options of what your design would look like using different threads. So if you just want it to randomly find colors for you and display them, you can come through here and say, okay, I have this color of thread. I have this color of thread. I have this color of thread and this color. And you can pick your palette and choose different things. So I'm going to say, okay, so I have these 5 colors that match my kitchen, so that I want to see what it would randomly look like using those colors. Okay. And then you can add, if you like one or more, you can add it to your favorites. And then that way, when you want to see the ones you like, you can preview them all at one time. But every time you touch refresh, you're going to get a different set of designs, but it's still using the core of the colors that you chose. It just is mixing in other ones. Okay. So then if I come in here and want to use a gradient, and I'm just going to say auto, and now it's showing us what it would look like using a monochromatic color palette. Then of course we have vivid, which are our bright colors. And you can pin and choose specific colors you want it to use as well. And then here it is in pastels. So that could be a real fun thing to work with there. All right, other things that you can do is, of course, you can move it in your hoop area. And this happens to be the hoop that I had on, was that little dotted line there. You can touch and you can drag and make it bigger. You can touch and drag and make it smaller. If I can touch it and drag it. There we go. Okay. Then up at the top, there's an open circle. You can touch and rotate with that. And this is all visual and artistic. If you go into edit, then you can do things a little bit more specific. So in rotate, you can rotate by 90, 10, 1, or 1/10 of a degree. So you can get things rotated just specifically where you want them. And then of course you can move your design here and put it in the center with that center button. Another thing in edit is size. When we resize this, we were only able to go up 20% larger or 20% smaller, and it wouldn't go any more. And that's because when you have a design, if you make it bigger and you make it too big, you're going to have holes. If you make it really small, it's going to have just a whole bunch of thread being jammed into one section. And then you're not going to get a good stitch out. So it limits you. But if you touch this zigzag button right here under resize, this is going to allow you to change the size of the design up to 200% larger or down to 50% of the original size, and it will add in stitches and take them out. See how beautiful that is? And that is really big now. It went from 5 inches to 10 inches. And then if we take it down to a smaller size, it will take out the stitches, and now it's only 3 inches. So instead of having to go to a computer and redigitize the design, the machine can do it for you. Okay. And then if you say okay and you like that, you can touch your memory button and you can save it into memory. And when you save it in memory, you can save it into the machine, which is the pocket, a memory stick. You can send it via Wi-Fi to your software or to a SD card. When you go to embroidery, this is when you're ready to stitch it out. And this is, remember, where you're going to find the snowman. Oh, and this, by the way, is a basting stitch. So if you ever need to baste, that's where you find that. But on the display here on the right-hand side, it shows you the color that's going to stitch and what that area looks like. And when you go to the next color, it will display the color that needs to be stitched. Down at the bottom, there is a needle with a minus and a plus sign. This is how you advance or go back stitches. So if your thread breaks and you need to go back stitches, you touch this and you can go back 10, 1, 100, 1,000 stitches at a time, or go forward 1, 10, 100, or 1,000 stitches at a time. If you want to see what the next color segment is, you can just push the down arrow and it will show you the colors as you're going to go on. Okay. All right. Now, let's return, because there's something else that you can do that is really fun on this machine, and that is add in stippling. So if you touch the stipple button, this will let you add in stippling around your design. So you can do your embroidery of your lemons, and then you could put batting and backing behind it and push the stipple and then stitch the stipple out, and it will stipple your fabric for you. This is really fun if you want to make small projects and you want your fabric to be quilted. So you can do that. You can change the spacing, which is how far apart the wiggles are. So you can make it bigger or smaller. You can also choose how far away it is from your design. That's what the distance is. Okay. And then up here in the upper right-hand corner, you can choose the decorative fills. So in here under select, there we go, you have a bunch of different designs that you can choose to go around your lemons. The leaves might be really pretty. And then you can change the size of those as well, and the distance. Another one that is, oh, and by the way, this is really fun to do just without a design there, because you can have, and I'll show you that in a little bit, but then you can make your own quilted fabric for little bags and things like that. Okay, let's look at the middle one now. It's a flower, and it has the cascading stitches around it. This is your echo stitch. So you're able to create beautiful echo stitching on your machine. And you can change the spacing, how far apart they are from each other, and then of course the distance from the design. Okay. So this is a really, really pretty fabulous feature. Okay. This feature right here, which has the little shield on it, this is how you can make a patch. So if you wanted to create a patch of your design, you just touch that and automatically makes a patch outline. The last thing I want to show you right here, Well, actually, I see more I need to show you, but let's touch this flower right here and see how it's just the outline. What this will do is memorize the outer shape of your design, and you can add distance between the design and the line. So it has a margin, and then you're going to put it into memory. And when you put it into memory, it's going to go into your IQ Designer or Design Center for you to use that shape again later. And so I'll show you that. So just remember the lemons and we'll come back to it. Another fun thing that I want to show you is this one. Let me close it again. This one right here. So what this will do is let you have multiples in your hoop. So if you want to build multiples going up and down, I can add one up there. I can add one down at the bottom, and you have multiples. Then you can also space them if you need them to be further apart or closer together. So if you're doing a bunch of patches or whatever, you can actually build multiples right in your hoop. And then if we want to go horizontally, we can add them that way and add them that way. And then we have built a nice full hoop of the design. And I tried to add one more up there and it got mad at me. It says I can't do any more. They're too big. So if I move this guy down, then I could add another one up there. Okay, so now we have 12 lemons in our hoop, and we didn't have to do them one at a time. Okay. All right. Any questions on embroidery? You ready to get into IQ Designer? It's pretty fun. Okay. I'm going to go back to my home, which will clear out my selection, and I'm going to go to IQ Designer. Now it wants to know if I want to go back and use the same thing that I was doing before. Not really. I just want a clean page. So this is kind of your work surface. And what IQ Designer and Design Center is an area on the machine where you can create your own embroidery designs. So this is really fun. So let me show you a couple of, for examples. I'm going to switch cameras. Okay. So a couple of things that we've had fun doing is this is a recipe, a photocopy of a recipe that my mother had for peanut brittle. And I really don't have much of anything from my mom. I don't know where all her recipes went, but for some reason I had this one. So I took this into Design Center and had it create this nice towel. And I was able to embroider this out for my kids and for my brother and my nephew. And so everyone has a copy of my mother's recipe in her handwriting. And that is so special. Just such a neat thing. So that's an example of something that you're going to be able to do. Another thing that you're going to be able to do is create your own custom quilting. So if you want to do something like this, where you want to have beautiful quilting in an area, the machine is jam-packed full of beautiful, beautiful quilting patterns, and you can decide where you want them to be. You can even create your own quilt pattern by drawing on the screen. So you can do things like that. Another thing that I really enjoyed doing was this little quilt right here. Oh, he's upside down. Hold on. Okay, so this quilt was a cheater panel. And so I was able to define where I wanted the stipples to go. And then I was able to trace the little dinosaurs and create, let me see if I can find that, there we go, and create custom quilt patterns to put in the quilt itself so that match the fabric exactly. So that was really fun. So I'm going to show you how to do that type of thing. So let me find my mats. So your machine comes with this little guy here. This is a scanning mat. And I'm going to pop him in there, and then you can take and put an image of your choosing right on there. Oh, and then this one was fun. I should show you this one real quick. Let me see if I can find the picture. This was a coloring book. And I thought that was really pretty, but I thought there would be no way in the world the machine could do that. And there's the stitch out of it. Isn't that cool? Just amazes me. And there's some beautiful coloring books out now. So what you want to do is take your image, your drawing, or whatever you're working with, and place it on your mat. And then there are little magnets that you're simply going to set down on top, and that will hold the fat paper in place. Okay, and then what we're going to do is come back and take a look over here. So now over here, to bring the image that we have over on the scanning plate, we're going to touch this little leaf up at the top, which is going to bring in the artwork. So we can image scan, which means just bring it as a background image. Do we want it to find the line, or is it a color picture? And this is a line, so I'm going to say scan. And now the machine is using the camera to scan the plate, and then it is going to put the picture right on the screen where we are. And this will take it a minute or two. Let me see if I can't get that camera to go over there. I was hoping I could. All right, so this is a time that you can have lunch or something. Here's another one that I did. This was a pattern that I purchased at the Puyallup Quilt and Craft Show a couple of years ago. And so I took the pattern, I bought the pattern, and then I scanned it. I made a photocopy of the pattern and scanned it. And this is the stitch out that I got. That worked out just beautifully. And then there was this is another pattern that I had purchased. This is a Kimberbell. It was in one of their books. And this was a hand embroidery book. And I don't do hand embroidery, but here's how it turned out when the machine turned it into stitches, which I think is just so much fun. Okay, so on the screen of the machine, you can see that here's the image that was on my paper, and it's taken a picture of it, including those magnets, which I don't want those to sew out. So I'm going to crop around my image and just get in so it only includes the information that I want in the design, and then touch OK. And then it sees the line, and I can touch set. And now at this point, it's ready to stitch out if I want to. So if I touch next, you will see what it's going to look like. It's a satin stitch, but we could do other things there to it. So I've come back, and now let's change some things. You have two different types of stitches that you can use in here. Filled in a whole area, or the lines. So if I want to fill in the petals, I'm going to touch on my fill, and you can choose the color you want it to be. You can choose it if you want it to be a stipple, or do you want it to be a decorative stipple, a decorative fill. So maybe I want to have this pattern in that petal, and I say okay and okay. Now what I want to do is put that pattern in the petal. When you do that, we're going to use the paint bucket. You can see there's a paint brush and a paint bucket. Let me show you what the paint brush would do. And it's blue, so it's highlighted. If I use the paint brush, it's going to brush the pattern. Do you see that? So I don't want to color that whole leaf in and sit there and try to color it. That would be too much time. So let me undo that. So if you use the paint bucket, it will let you pour the design into the whole area. Pour, 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 pour. So it's much faster and much easier. Now let's do these outer bits and let's make those leaves. So I'm going to make that green, and I think I'm just going to do a stipple and okay. And it's on bucket, which means I can pour. All right. So now we're ready to go. Let's see what that would look like. Okay, that's pretty cool, but I don't like that black line. So let's return. That satin stitch is so heavy. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see a little bit better. So right now we have a satin stitch. Let's see what options we have. We have a satin stitch, straight stitch, a triple straight stitch, which would do two things. It would be more bold because it's 3 layers of thread. Also, if it's going to be more durable. So if you're doing something for a child or something that you're going to launder, it's going to get a lot of wear, then maybe a triple stitch would be good. You also have a candle wicking stitch, you have a chain stitch, blanket stitch, a V blanket stitch, and then you have decorative stitches. So you could put one of these stitches on the outer edge if you want to. I just want to do a running stitch, and I think I want it to be orange. Now, we have 2 icons. There's a pencil and a paint bucket. What do you think the pencil's going to do? It's going to draw. I don't want to retrace all those lines. That would be difficult to do. So I'm going to undo. So I'm going to choose my paint bucket and simply touch one of the lines. And you can see, let me fade. You can see that that line has turned orange. So you know that it has changed to this line. The center ones haven't changed, so they're going to be still satin stitch. And let's just change a couple of them so you can see. So I've changed 4 of them and 3 of them are still satin stitch. Usually I will choose a color completely different than the black that it originally does, so that way I can see what I have done and what I haven't done. Then I'm just going to touch next, and you'll be able to see what your design's going to look like. And then when you say set, it's leaving the Design Center and IQ embroidery, and it's going to go into the embroidery side. And now it is an embroidery design ready to be stitched out. And we didn't save it on the way, so there's nothing for me to go back to. I would have to do it again if I wanted to do it over again or change something. But now it's an embroidery design. Are there any questions on that?
Riva?
Yes, ma'am.
It looks like it has to be a very simple outline design. Is that correct?
That depends. This wasn't.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Right.
But just outline. You can't have anything with color in it originally.
Yes, you can.
Oh, okay.
Yes, you can. So we'll go back into IQ Designer. When you touch the plant up here, the little leaf, there's an illustration design.
I see it.
And that is meant for color. But what I have found is it depends on the item and the size and the color variance and all that sort of stuff. I found some items to work well and some not. So it will depend on your artwork.
Okay, so just try it out and see what happens.
Exactly. And sometimes the machine does better, and this sounds really strange, but we have found sometimes that the scanning of the artwork can find more challenge if you have really good lighting in your room. If it's too bright and it's overtaking the lights that are on the machine, then it's doesn't work as well. It's just weird. So you'll have to play with things. So if it doesn't turn out one way, give it a try with something else. Maybe with the lights dimmed or at a different time of day or something like that. But I've even taken fabric and scanned that and used the fabric design So I've taken this and I brought it in and used that as artwork to work off of as well.
Thank you.
So, and then that way, with this software or with this feature in the machine, it's never going to replace full digitizing software because that you have so much capability and power in, but you will be able to do an awful lot of things with it, if that makes sense. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
So I'm going to take this little piece of fabric just to put it on my mat, just so you can see how it works. And let's try illustration design with this. If you have fabric, it's okay for you to hoop your fabric in a hoop and use an embroidery hoop. You don't have to use the scanning plate. You can use an embroidery hoop. So just bear that in mind if you're working with fabric. You can do that. And okay, it's getting close to running its course there. I think it has one more pass. It might have two more passes. But the other thing that I like to do is if I have something like the butterflies that I showed you here, and I'll show you what I did on that. So on here, can you see this little design right here? That's a little butterfly. And I took one of the designs in the fabric and traced it and used that as a design. So in here, here's the colored spot. So we're going to bring that down. Remember, get rid of your magnets and then okay. And I cannot guarantee you this is going to look like anything because this is the full color one, Francesca. So, all right. It's thinking about it. That's a lot of information there. So usually what I will do is I will scan it like this, but have it come in just as an image. So it's in the background. It's not stitch information. And then I will trace over it. So that's what it did to that. You see how it took out some of the color and simplified it. So it may or may not be what you're thinking it might be. Does that make sense?
Yes, I'm doing it as you're doing it too. So we'll see what happens with mine.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to return because I'm not happy with that. Cancel and return. And let's go in here and okay, good. Here it is. Here's an image. So now I have it just as an image in the background. I'll brighten that up so you can see it a little bit. So here's my image. So if I wanted to have this be a design right here, I could choose my pencil and just trace my line. Okay, so you can use the pattern, which that's what I did for the butterfly, is just trace what I saw. And then when I went next, you have just let me get that. You have just your design that you created. Okay, so if there's elements you want, sometimes it's easier for you to tell it where to put the stitches than to try to correct it. All right, so, and I want to show you something else in Design Center. So in here at the top, you have a zoom in. And you can zoom in up to 1600%, which is huge, right? So you can zoom in, you can pan, and when you pan, that will move the eye, what you're looking at on the screen. So you can move it into position. Then you have how bright and how dark the background is. So if you touch light, it gets so light you can't even see it. And if you go bright, it gets so bright. So it's nice and bright so you can see it. But the challenge is, where did the thing I drew go? So if you're trying to see your background really well, and then you don't think that you're creating anything, it might be because you're too bright up here. So you'll need to fade that down a little bit so you can see your element. Okay. All right, another thing I want to show you is I'm going to clear everything on here. If you're creating your own area. So if I wanted to create well, I'll show you this first. Here are some basic shapes. If you want to do a basic shape like a quilt label or something like that, you have these to work from. You can have just an outline, you can have just an inside, or you can have an inside and an outline. I usually work with the outline. Then there's some other shapes here. You have open shapes. This means, okay, these guys close. See how it's enclosed? These are enclosed. This one, they don't close. They're just lines. Okay. And this one is that flower. Look, here's our lemons. So you can create your own custom shapes that you can work with. Okay. And that's all from an embroidery design. All right. Another thing that I want to show you is, let me grab a hoop and pop him on, if I can find where he went. There he is. Okay, so this little hoop here. Let's say you have a quilt block and you want to stipple in here, but you don't want to stipple over the top of the embroidery and you don't want to stipple out into the sashing. So I'm going to pop him onto our machine, and then I'm going to ask it to scan, and I'm going to scan it just as a background because there's nothing on there that I want it to automatically create. I just want to do an image scan. And this is a smaller hoop, so it will take less time, which is always nice. Okay, last pass. So I don't know about you, but I am not the best at free motion quilting. So if the machine can do it for me, that's awesome. Okay, so here is our area. Let me zoom in a little bit. Okay, so I don't want it to go, I don't want it to stipple into Minnie and Mickey, and I don't want it to go outside. So I could use the shapes and grab a rectangle and do that. Excuse me. And I'll resize that because I need it to see the red line. It is too big. So I need to shrink it in and have it become more of the size of the width of the area that I want it to be in. And then I also need to make it longer. And then I would need to rotate it. Okay. So let's make it a little bit bigger. And we'll just pretend that I have it in there straight. Okay. Now we want to get Minnie and Mickey so they're not in going to be stitched. So what I'm going to do is grab the pencil and I'm going to draw around Minnie and Mickey. And if I want to, this might be a faster way to have drawn the rectangle as well. Okay. Now I want to show you something. I'm going to use my pan. Can you see how I crisscross the line there? Can you see that? When you're going to fill an area with stitches, you want to make sure that the lines that you have, if you want it to be a boundary, that the fence is closed. If you got a hole in the fence, it's going to leak out. The cows are going to get out. Okay, so you want to have a solid boundary around the outside edge there. You want to have a solid boundary around that. Does that make sense? So then you can come in and grab whatever type of fill you want. And we use the paint bucket because we want it to go all at one time and it will fill the area. Okay, I'm going to take the eraser. If I had a hole in my fence and I paint bucket, it fills in the whole thing. So if this happens to you, you know you have a hole in your fence and you'll need to find your hole. So that might be, zooming in really big, and that's where the pan comes in, because then you can, move it around and find out where it is. Aha, there it is. So I can take my pencil and close my fence, and I didn't close it there. I don't know if you can see that, but I know, whoops, undo, pan. There's a little tiny leak right there. So I'm going to actually close it again. Okay. Now that's ugly. but that's okay because I don't want that to sew. I only want my stipples to show. I'm just to sew out. Okay, so let's zoom back down. And I want to show you what it's going to look like when we go to the next page. So if I have my stipples and I fill that in and we go to next, you're going to notice the stippling is lovely. And then I've got those big old ugly fat satin stitches that look horrible. So I'm going to go back. For me, this is the easiest thing to do is I'm going to go back and I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see. And then I'm going to choose, actually I need to go down to 200. I'm going to choose, did my picture go away or is it there? I think my picture went away there, didn't it? Is it back?
It's back now.
Okay, good. All right. So on my image here, I don't want those big fat satin stitches, right? So under my line choices, there's this one right here, which is satin stitch with nothing, with a line through it, no stitches. And notice all my colors went gray. So now what I want to do is come over here, make sure you choose the paint bucket and touch on the line. And you'll notice if you're looking really hard, you're going to notice that the color gets a lighter. So see how my line is a little bit dark there? And I'll zoom in. See how it's a black line? When I touch it, it kind of goes gray. So it's not very obvious, but when we go next, you're going to see that we just have the stipples and we don't have the line. You see a red line around the outside, but that's just saying that it's selected. So it's not a stitching line. Okay. And then when we're ready, so we just go to set and we have our design. You can move it where you need to, but don't move it if you really have it in the hoop. If you move it, then you don't know if it's going to match, but it will match if you don't touch it. Okay. Any questions on that? That is such a cool feature. It's just amazing. Okay. Let's see, what else do we have? We have about 30 minutes left. So I want to make sure that I answer any questions or show you anything that you had questions on. So I think we might open it up to off a specific topic and let you, well, there is one more thing I do want to show you. I lied. There's something I want to show you. And that is in embroidery. So thank you for your questions. I'm going to go back home. And this is going to be a little bit of a challenge for me to be able to show you the way that I have things set up. So let me think of how I can get this camera moved over. So maybe I can show you both at the same time. I don't know if I can. Let me see. Okay, close enough. All right. So I am going to switch cameras. Okay, so now see if I can get him to stand up a little bit better. And I don't know if I can get him in front of that or not. Okay, so we're gonna pretend that you can see everything. I'm gonna go to embroidery and there's this section right here. Oh, I should tell you about this section. You've got obviously designs. This is your lettering. And in lettering, you choose whichever font you want. And in your fonts, you do have different sizes. So you would choose a letter and then you have uppercase, lowercase, and any extras if you have them. Once you choose one letter, down at the bottom here, you see where it says large, medium, small. That's when you would choose the size you want it to be. It will change the first letter and then make all the rest of the letters be that size. But if you do 3 letters and then push it, only the last couple that you do after that will change size. Okay, so I'm going to return and return. All right, then you also have monograms, you have shapes, and in shapes, you have all these different shapes up top. And then you have 10 different shapes, and then you have 14 different edges for those shapes to have. This is really good if you're making labels. because you can choose a rectangle and then say you want it to have this vine pattern on it, and you have that. Okay, and then when you set it, then you can change its size. Okay. All right, and this is decorative stitches. So in here, you're going to find decorative stitches and buttonholes and decorative elements to go around buttonholes. So if you want absolutely perfect buttonholes, and you just do them in the hoop, because then they're going to be perfect. Okay, C is for couching. But this one right here, this is your sashing. This is quilted sashing. So let me find my little guy here. This is one of them. See if I can get it in there so you can see. So the sashing on this quilt has a continuous quilt pattern done that goes all the way around the quilt. And you can do a rectangular square in a single color. You can choose a 2-color design, or you could do a hexagon. Okay. Now, this is really cool how it works. We're just going to go to a basic one. So if I choose whichever design it is, and I choose set, there's 2 questions that the machine is asking at the moment. And one is, do you want this to be stitched out in one hoop? So can it fit in a hoop? Does your project fit in one hoop? Or are you going to need to rehoop it? This is where it gets really amazing. If you have a quilt, a project that is even up to 118 inches, so a king size quilt, you're going to be able to create a continuous quilted pattern for that project. So the first thing it wants to know is overall from left to right, from the outside, how big is your project? So let's say 65. And we'll say set. Did I say set yet? Nope. Okay. Then it wants to know how tall it is. So let's say it's 72 tall. And then I'm going to say set. And now it wants to know how wide do you want this to be? And this is between just over an inch and just under 4 inches in width is what you have to work with. So if I want to do 2.5 in my sashing, I can do that. And then set, and it's all done. It asks you what size hoop you want to stitch it out in. And so this is important that you choose this now, because if you choose the wrong sized item, the wrong size hoop, then you're not going to be able to use the hoop you want, because the creation of the design, or the cutting up of the design, is going to be specifically made for the hoop that you tell it. So if I want to use the 8x8 hoop, I need to come and find my 8x8 hoop. Well, apparently I'm going to use my 9.5 by 9.5, or let me just do this one. There we go. Next. Okay. So now what this has is it's showing us the pieces that it's going to break it up into. Okay. And there are 34 individual pieces it's making. And you can choose either a straight quilting or a triple stitch. And you want to choose to put it into memory. And this is saved into the memories machine. Yes. And there it is right there. All right. So what we want to do now is, if you're ready to sew it, is you're going to touch that and it shows you all the pieces. Don't be confused by that. That's for the machine to use, and you don't need to worry about it. We're going to choose the whole thing because we want to do our whole project. And then set. All right. So now let me get my hoop. And I just have a magnet hoop that I'm going to show you on real quick. And I'm going to take, never hoop in your lap, but that's what I'm doing. So don't do as I'm doing, do as you should do. All right. So let me grab this popping in there and set that down. All right. So the machine is telling us about how to hoop this. You don't have to be perfectly straight. That's okay. In fact, I'm very crooked. I need to move mine a little bit because I'm not even in the area where I want to be. So give yourself kind of what it looks like there, and you're going to need to have some margin, of course, on your hoop to have working space, but hoop it like that. It always starts in the upper right-hand corner. Always, always. So here is, let me put the hoop on the machine and then I'll show you what we've got. Because I kind of want to walk you through how this is going to work. I think we have enough time. This doesn't take very long because the machine does walk you through everything. So let me shift camera over a little bit. Okay, so there's my hoop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch OK, and we're going to follow what the machine says. So the machine says use the left, right, up and down keys that it will show us in a minute to position the red dot in the corner of the sashing. Okay, so let's touch OK, and your screen's going to look like this. And here's your move buttons. You have your little crosshair in that spot where the red dot was. Now, if we come back over here, I think you can see just barely there is some red right here. Let me see if I can lean it in so you can see that a little bit better. There we go. Can you see the green little mark? That is that inner point where we want this inner point to be up in our corner right there. Okay, so now I'm going to use my up arrows. Let me show you that. I'm going to use the up arrows until my design is where it should be. So now I'm almost there. So I want to turn it back so you can see that. So I'm going to move it up. I went too far, a little bit too far, and then move it over. Okay, and then so then I have that just right in the corner there. All right, and I know it's hard to see on the screen here, but at home you'll be able to see it quite nicely. All right, so then what we're gonna do is you're gonna sew it out. And I know we don't have time to sew everything out, so I'm gonna touch OK. And I'm gonna notice there's 173 stitches in this. This is just for this moment. This is not for real stitching out. But I'm going to go 100 and come on, faster, faster, faster. I'm going to actually advance it over so I can get it so we can be done. And it's not cooperating. There we go. Okay, so let me get that. Now I'm at the last stitch. So we'll pretend that I stitched it out. And I'm going to say sew. And it will stitch that last stitch, and then it's happy. And it says, and I'm going to mark that spot. Here's where that stitch went in, right there. Okay, can you see my little dot? All right, now the machine says, after you're done sewing a section, it says, the embroidery is finished. Do you want to connect the next pattern? Why, yes, please. So here's the next pattern. Now, the cool thing is that the machine knows exactly where the previous one left off. So we don't have to worry about that. All we need to do is make sure that the bottom left-hand corner hits our line. So I'm going to say, okay. And now you'll notice that instead of move, it has angles. So let's look at our pattern. Oh my, I'm way off. Look at how far over that is because I hooped crooked. So I'm going to move this over using, and I'm actually using, I was using the 1 degree. but depending on how much you need to go. All right, so there we go. I'm trying to get a little bit more. There we go. So now we can stitch this out, and we know for a fact that it's going to stitch out right where we want it to go. So I'm going to come back here. We would say, okay, and then we would stitch it out. So I'm going to pretend stitch it out. And we've got 429 stitches in this particular one. So I'm going to go, there's my 400 and 20 and 20 and 9. Okay, it's being slow today. Or I'm being slow. Of course, you don't have to worry about this if you're at home. So what it's going to do now, and I'm just going to say, put the foot down and stitch. Okay, so now it's done. And you'll have the stitches here, and you will have your stitch ends right here. Now we've run out of hoop. So now we need to pay attention to what it's saying over here. It says, do you want to do the next position? Well, of course we do. So let me touch OK. Now it's going to ask us to rehoop to be about like that. And then we shift it, and it's going to, and I'll shift it up real quick so I can kind of walk you through this. Okay, so I've got it rehooped. I'm going to say okay. Now it wants me to connect the marker to where that last stitch was. So it's going to have us move it, but let's take a look at what we're seeing here. So there it is way over there, and here is my mark. That's where my thread ends. So I'm going to move this down, use the directional arrows, and move it over so it actually will line up. Mine's not going to because I didn't move the hoop enough. So I guess I could do that because we're not really sewing, but you want to make sure that you do what it asks you to do. You know, when it shows you the picture of how to hoop, you want to do it pretty much the way that it does. So now we're okay there. So I touch okay. And then it's going to want us to make sure that it's angled correctly. And so I say, okay. And I notice there that it's a little bit too far this direction. So I need to go back. Okay, so that's basically how you're going to use the quilt sashing feature. The machine will walk you through using that function very, very easily, and get it so you can go all the way around your project. The one thing that I would recommend is that you do that all at one time, and don't think you're coming back to it 3 days later, because it's much easier to do one continuous than it is to not do that. Okay, all right. We have just about 15 minutes left. Is there anything that you have questions on, or that you've been wondering about the machine, or anything that I can help you with there? You guys are all quiet. You're all pros. All right. Is it that you haven't had your machines long enough that you don't know what to ask? That could be it too. So let me see if there's anything else I can think of to share with you. Oops. Oh, sorry. Look at that. I just whacked you.
Reva,
Yes, ma'am.
I will jump in. I tried to do a scan of, it was a line drawing. It was not that complicated. It was from one of those Dover books.
Uh-huh.
And it came out, it showed what the original was, and it showed out how the scan looked, and it was way too light. Is there a way to darken it?
Yes. Okay, so let me slide my hoop off and I will show you.
Thank you.
If I can find where I put my little guy. Here he is. I'll put him back on. One thing that you might find if you do have a image that has a lot of information is that there does get to be a point where the machine says, whoa, way too much. I can't
No,
do
this
that.
was simple. This was
Yes,
fairly
I know,
simple.
I understand that. I just wanted to let everyone know that that is a possibility to happen. But yes, if you scan, so let's go to our line drawing and scan. Then when it's done scanning, you're going to be able to increase or decrease the amount of brightness. I have found if I've done image scan instead of line scan on accident, that sometimes that comes up lighter and I've touched the wrong button.
That's
but
exactly what I did.
You will find that there is a difference in, sometimes you do need to darken it up so it can see. While it's doing that, the other thing that I want to tell you about is when I was doing the dinosaur quilt, since I wanted just certain parts of that print to use that, what I did is I took parchment paper or a paper I could see through and a Sharpie, a fine Sharpie marker, and I traced the pattern. So that way I had a clean, crisp pattern that could automatically be used in IQ Designer or Design Center. Okay. So on here, we have our image. And are you seeing that now?
No.
Not yet?
Mm-mm.
Okay. I'll let the camera catch up. It seems to be slow behind me. Okay. All right. So down at the bottom here, it says grayscale detection level. And you can choose to have it be lighter or darker depending on what you need to have happen with your artwork. And so that can help pick up lighter lines or the whatnot. And like I said, if you ever are working with artwork that doesn't seem to want to cooperate because you're just not getting that artwork to be dark enough, then you can consider just tracing the parts that you want to make sure it's a bold line that it can see it.
Okay, I didn't see that option before. I'll have to try it again later.
Okay, it's possible because I think the grayscale detection is not there if you happen to touch image scan, which is just right above line scan. So if maybe it thought you were touching the other one.
That's the mistake I made. Yeah. Thank you.
Because they're right next to each other. And if my finger is just a little bit too high on the box, you know, it's over for me. So. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Sounds like not. Okay, well, we're about right at time. So unless there is something else, we can go ahead and I'm going to put this back so I'm not sharing so I can see the screen properly and make sure I'm not missing anything there. Okay. So if you have any, oh, I guess there's something in chat. Let me see. Oh, the end stitch marker. That's what, there we go. That was Bonnie, I think. Okay, and Sue said, more overview with the new features, too new to ask questions. Oh, more like overwhelmed with the new features. Yeah, I understand that, Sue. It is a lot of stuff. So the best thing that I have found when learning new features on machines is a nice overview is good because then you can go back and look for the information and and utilize that. So that is a pretty, it's very, very easy to feel overwhelmed. Okay, let me go back, and I've lost my piece of fabric that I had. Where did it go? And I will try to show you the endpoint marker. Goodness gracious. I had it right here, right on top, and now I can't find it. So here's my little tracings of my dinosaurs. That worked out really well. Okay, come here, fabric. I know, see, I already have fabric with the lines drawn on it and the whole bit. So I guess I'll just have to draw new lines on a different piece of fabric, I guess. Because it has walked away. All right, so let's go back to sewing. I'm gonna go home and go to sewing. And I need to draw myself a line. We're gonna pretend that it's straight, people. I had a nice straight line, but I'm not seeing it now, so we're gonna pretend. Okay. So I may need to go back to the other camera to get it so you can see what I'm doing here. I'm just putting my foot back on and gonna get my needle threaded up. Okay, and I will switch so that way I can do what we had done a minute ago by going back and forth and show you both. Okay. All right. So in your settings, under sewing, I can't remember which page it's on, but we have endpoint setting temporary stop. I'm going to turn that on and then say okay. All right, now I'm going to choose a decorative stitch. Let's just use this one right here is fine. And then that's awfully big. Maybe I don't want to use that one. Decisions, decisions. There's too many pretty stitches. There we go. All right. But I don't know why my end stitch marker is not showing up. Let's go look up now that my brain is all dead. Let's see. Sewing. Here we go. Let's watch a video, shall we? Refresh my mind and everything. Okay, so yes, we have our stickers. You get your stickers. They look like that. So they're just a snowball, not a snowman. And I'm going to place that onto my fabric, and I will show you how that looks. Okay, so with our fabric, when we have our snowball, you notice that there is a horizontal line going through the snowball. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is place that where I need the end to go, and I just need two hands to get him on there straight. Okay, so I've got him placed there. You can put him to the left or to the right. It has to be within like 2 inches of your stitching line. You can put them right at the very bottom if you want to, but then you're going to have to move it when you get there. So having it off to the side is good. And I like having it to the side. I'm not going to turn a corner on. Okay, so I'm going to slip him under the needle. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so then I'm going to go up to my settings here, and there's my end stitch marker. I'm going to touch that, and it is going to ask me how I want it to end. Do I want it to end with a full repeat or a partial? And you see it shows you to put it right in front of. You don't have to put it right in front of. Okay, so then I'm going to say, I'm actually not going to close it. I'm going to just come over here and get ready to stitch him out. And it is bright, so we'll just see him stop, but if you're not, I'm not going to be able to lighten the light because it needs that light. There is right here, you can probably maybe faintly see it. There is a blue line. Can you see that little tinge of blue? There's a blue line going left and right, and that is my horizontal line. And that should be, when that line gets here, is where it's going to stop. Okay, so I'm going to put my foot down and I'm going to go ahead and start sewing. And I better speed that up, huh? Oh, and that's a good thing. When you're doing decorative stitches, if you sew at a consistent speed, you're going to get a better stitch. And if you stitch, you can stitch at a higher rate of speed with a decorative stitch because it's not going to get away from you because it has to go, it has to be able to meter it. Okay, it is, that blue line is actually right on my line right here. And so now it is slowing down so it can stitch. And it says, oh, sorry. Then it wants you to make sure that you remove the sticker and then you can continue sewing. I don't need to remove my sticker because he is, I need to say okay, because I still have some distance to go. Okay. So it's memorized where that is, and it's going to go, and then it will stop when it gets to the line. It was assuming that I had my snowball right in front. So there it stopped. And now we can pivot and just keep sewing. All right. And Bonnie, thank you for asking about that because I totally forgot to, I had all my stuff here, but my fabric ran away and I had forgotten to show you that. So there is the corner that we've turned. So that works out pretty well. Okay. Any other questions there? All right. Okay. All right. I think we've caught up on all the questions in the chat. And is there anything else? I know sometimes it takes a while to get to the mute button or to type a question in. So I wanted to give you enough time to do that. So while you're, if anyone's doing that, that's great. Keep doing it. But remember, this is recorded. And so as soon as the recording is rendered then available, then I'll be sending that out to you. It's not going to be immediate. It will be a minute or two before I can send it to you. And I mean, that might be tonight, it might be tomorrow morning. But I will get you the recording so you can watch this over and over. And, you know, play with it and practice and have fun. All right, so thank you all for joining me today. I hope you enjoy your new machine. It is just full of so many possibilities and so many exciting things. So I wish you lots of luck with that. And I want you to have a great time. All right, have a very good day. Thank you. See you later.
Thank you.
Oh, now she asked a question already. Turn it off.